Hello, everyone. I just want to make sure those of you who are on Zoom can hear me right now. If you could wave and our Zoom facilitator will let us know, and I think that's working. I'm Anna Olsen from CTRL, and I'm very excited to welcome all of you. I know we have a larger audience online this morning. I know many of you are coming in for other sessions later today, but welcome to this second Faculty Institute on Artificial Intelligence in Teaching and Research. So we had the first time last August with our 3 faculty fellows and with Alison Thomas, who's joining us today as well. And a lot has happened since then. We are really glad that you want to continue to join us on this expedition to explore how this all impacts what we do at AU, in the world, and everywhere. And we thought it would be important and useful to start out this iteration of the Institute with something very special, hearing from our students. So it's my pleasure to introduce the facilitator for this session, Hannah Jardine from CTRL, who's going to introduce our student panelists. Welcome, everyone.
All right, I'm going to pull up our intro slide. We actually have a few opening thoughts for you all. Making sure that looks right. All right. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, as Anna said, I'm Hannah Jardine. I'm with the Center for Teaching, Research and Learning, one of the teaching and learning specialists, also the supervisor for our CTRL student partners. So this morning we'll have a conversation with the CTRL student partners, some of them in the room, some of them online. And we'll meet the panelists in a few slides here, but I'm also sharing kind of this moderating this panel along with Alison Thomas from the Office of Academic Integrity, who's joining us online. So just very quickly, I'll run through our list of presenters, but like I said, they'll introduce themselves in a few slides. We have Nasaiah Algarin, who's actually will be on a recorded video because he has already started an internship. Katelyn, Lewicky, and Gabriela Rupp are here with us in person, and then Wofford and Ayah Morsy are with us online. All right, so this morning, what we hope for you to get out of this session, first, that we challenge the assumptions being made about students' use of and opinions on AI. So the student panel will talk a lot about just kind of the complexity of AI and different things that we might think are happening and what is actually happening. We'll also reflect on AU students' perceptions of generative AI in their education and different perceptions, and then identify some ethical concerns with AI that matter to students at AU. So now we'll meet our student panelists. So I'll have each one just go around quickly and introduce themselves, starting with Ayah, then Katelyn and Gabriela, then Zoe.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me in the room? I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect. I'm Ayah Morsy. I'm a master's student at SIS studying global environmental policy. My concentration is in water. Usually I'm the one that's leading student partners meeting with Hannah, but for today, I'm one of the panelists sharing my own insights and my own perspective as a grad student that sometimes runs into AI, and I'm more interested in like the research aspect of it and how it interferes with the environment. And yeah, I'm really excited for today.
Great, thank you. How about Katelyn? We'll test out the mics in the room.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Katelyn Lewicky. I use she, her pronouns. I just graduated with a BS in marketing from Kogod, and I'm starting my MS in marketing this fall.
Hi, I'm Gabriela Rupp. I am an undergrad student going into my senior year, and I'm studying secondary education and women's gender and sexuality studies, as well as a minor in poli-sci. And then I'm staying for an extra year after that for a master's in education policy.
Right, and back to you, Zoe, online.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm going into senior year. I'm an undergraduate in American Studies and a minor in African American, African Diaspora Studies. And other than that, I consider myself pretty well versed in a lot of the critical theory at this university. I'd like to shop around a bit.
Yeah, excellent. And like I said, Nasaiah or Naz will be in recording on as we go through the presentation. So I'm actually going to take us back really quick before we get into the questions for the students to these session outcomes, because Allison and I have a few opening comments for us. So I'll hand it over to Allison to introduce herself and talk a little bit about kind of the framing of the session today.
Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all. I'm Allison Thomas. I know a lot of you, and I'm glad to see you in this context. I'm a faculty member at AU, and I also run the Office of Academic Integrity. And I've had the pleasure of working with Hannah and this group of students. We've had some really great conversations, and one of the most wonderful takeaways, I think, is recognizing the nuanced perspectives about AI and kind of what it means to teach and learn in an age of AI from our students. I think it also emphasizes one of the big themes of today, which is AI is more complicated than giving someone a policy or telling someone to use or to not use AI. And so the conversations that I've had with these students were really insightful for me. I'm really excited for others to hear what they have to say and sort of recognize the importance of that collaboration and the importance of real engagement with these topics, not just as a policy that's on a syllabus or a set of rules, but a kind of opportunity to sort of wrestle with some of the more tangled questions that this raises. So I don't want to go on too long because I feel like there's a lot of great questions and everybody has some really awesome perspectives. So Hannah, if you wanted, I don't know if you had more to jump in, and then we'll get to our questions.
Yeah, sure. And I'll go back to the slide with listing our student panelists here, just to say a very quick note about who the CTRL student partners are. So I'm really proud to have these students here and to have been able to work with them over the last year and years for some of them, as well as our graduate assistant, Ayah, who's helped me lead the student partners, as she said. So for context, these undergraduates, Katelyn, Gabriela, Zoe, and Naz, they work directly with me and the teaching and learning team, and they bring the student perspective to the work that we do. So AI was one of many, many things that we focused on this year. And as you've seen in the emails that we send out, they've put together resources on a variety of things with that main goal of just bringing the student perspective to the way we're thinking about teaching and learning and supporting instructional development. So I just wanted to honor that and honor that we've put a lot of time and thought and energy into the perspectives we're bringing here to you today. And also just naming that they've been very interested in bringing this to faculty and had the sense that faculty could benefit from hearing some of their stories and insights. So with that, I'll hand it back to Allison to introduce the first question.
Great. So this was actually the first question I asked when I first met with all of you. I asked you sort of, where are you at AU? What do you do? And how does AI sort of cross your path here? So by way of a little bit more depth of introduction, I think everybody could benefit from hearing a little bit about where AI crosses your path. Ayah, if it's okay, I think I'll start with you.
Of course. So as I mentioned previously, my concentration's in water, and there's been a lot of growing research on water and its relationship with AI. But in terms of research, it crosses my path a lot. I've used tools like Elicit, Research Rabbit, to map out some academic papers and figure out like some conversation I'm like stepping into regarding like complex topics. And honestly, it's been helpful. It's like to make us like a sense of connection between like different peer-reviewed papers. Um, but also like I feel like it's been a mix of being super grateful for this efficiency, but also like trying to stay aware of like how it's like impacting my learning process or pulling me away from like deeper thinking. Um, and I sometimes feel like there's a little bit of like cognitive dissonance with it because like I recognize the usefulness of AI as a tool, but I'm also like questioning what like bigger things like its energy use, its water consumption, and just like broader environmental impacts. So yeah.
Thanks, Ayah. Okay, I can't see you in the room, but I'm gonna toggle that way. How about Katelyn?
Hi, happy to talk on it. So like I said, I'm fully in COGOD, both undergraduate and graduate. So as many of you may know, we are really encouraged to use AI. We have access to Perplexity AI, which I believe are the only ones at AU that have that. So yeah, we're really encouraged to use it. I have had several classes where we're penalized if we don't use AI on a given assignment project, whatever. I've had professors say that they made our exams with AI. I'd like to say that I've seen it all in COGOD.
My experience is very different from that, which Katelyn and I have talked about at length. So I operate in 3 different schools, so I kind of have a diverse perspective on AU a little bit, being in CAS and SOE and SPA sometimes. So within CRGC Critical Race, Gender, and Culture Studies department, we are encouraged not to use AI typically. There is a lot of instructor autonomy in that department, so it does vary. But typically the sense, and I do agree with this, is that using AI to produce academic content is contrary to our academic ethics in that field. Education is a little bit different. It's also a pretty critical view in our school, but I have seen folks encourage its use for lesson planning or other things like that. In SPA, it's a lot more heavily used, although it depends. Often I find it correlates with the age of the professor, how comfortable they are, either encouraging or banning students from using it or somewhere in between or outside of that. And then just kind of a recent example beyond academics on campus, I also work for Housing and Residence Life. And then in the summer, I work for Conference and Guest Services. And we were in training last week for that summer job. And AI was probably brought up in training like 3 or 4 times, partly as a joke, partly not, but just kind of an example of, oh, if you don't understand what we're talking about this Title IX policy or this safety policy or whatever the case may be, put it into AI. And the students' response to that was kind of a groan. And so I think that kind of highlights the level of fatigue on campus with just hearing about AI in general, regardless of how students feel about it. I'm finding that students are tired of hearing about it, which is understandable, but of course, important conversations to be having regardless.
Thanks to those of you in the room. I'll pop back over to Zoom and Zoe.
Yeah, so I am fully in the CRGC. So I am generally engaging with a lot of academic fields that are grounded in critical theory. And as such, most, if not all of my professors are hostile or at most dubious of AI. So I've had some professors who are okay with using it. Most of them are not. But the general consensus is that even if you use AI to perhaps like organize a paper or to get your thoughts together, that AI cannot generate your analysis. That's kind of the core principle that I tend to operate from as well, is that um like no matter what you're using it, whether it's regarding like making yourself more efficient or like using it to like put things together or to like check a paper for grammar, whatever you're using it for, it can't be the thing that starts and ends your academic theory.
Thanks, Zoe. I think our next, Hannah, you've got our next question, right?
Been working hard trying to make sure the people in the room can see speakers online. So the next question, and now I can't forward the slides now that we're the way we're sharing. 1 second. All right. So the next question, where do you recognize benefits of AI for learning? Or where do you see AI getting in the way of learning and well-being? So I think this one, we'll start with Ayah.
I'm gonna focus on research for this question. Only because like I don't know, that's like my relationship with AI in terms of learning. But like I mentioned, tools that I've used like Elicit or even like Chat GPT at times, they can be good at pulling summaries or mapping out like related papers. And like they may be helpful in the start of like projects, when you want to get like a broad sense of a field. But I started noticing when you do rely on these tools to do like a synthesis or like organizing your resources, the less you actually like sit down, read the papers, and do the old-fashioned like annotating and highlighting and really like find the research question of this paper instead of just like, oh, like what is the research question or what is this author arguing, you know? And I feel like that's where a lot of the learning happens is during that process. And AI obviously gets in between that. And I feel like it's very foundational for both undergraduates and graduates to really build those research skills. Like you don't just get it in like your research methods class, but you also do get it in all of your classes. And so like with going through that, it's easy to just like string together like AI generated like summaries and call it like research. But I feel like you really have to do the intellectual work of engaging with the field to really get the most out of it. And just like thinking into like my own concentration, like where I'm like, I don't know, researching things like politics of desalination or energy costs of like water technologies. Like these are things where if you miss the depth, you kind of like risk repeating like dominant narratives in the field because you're not really questioning assumptions are being made and popular like talking points, because that's what AI essentially does. It gathers like what is frequently said, but you're not really like grappling with questioning or being critical of that information. So while AI is useful, I've had to remind myself that speed and efficiency isn't the goal here. We all have competing priorities. We all have things to squeeze in our schedule, but I feel like when it comes to research, you really get the most out of it when you sit down and do the work rather than rely on this machine that is not worthwhile and is really taking away from your own development and as a researcher and a student. But yeah, that's where the real understanding is when you really sit down and make these questions and think about the assumptions and not rely on something that is just spitting out popular or dominant narratives.
Thank you, Ayah. And Zoe, I think you had something to add too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be echoing what A is talking about, but maybe a bit from the other side of it. So I don't personally use AI. I've not I mean, I know how to use it, but I've just not generally found it to be very helpful. However, I have had other people in my classes use AI, and I found it's pretty common in requirement classes, such as like habits of mind, and like I saw it quite a bit in my quantitative too, that it's just you get into these classes where you can tell that students don't really want to be there, and it all just kind of goes out the window. Like I've had to work with group mates for group projects where they've put our reading that we're supposed to do into DeepSeek. It's frustrating, but not entirely outside of expectation. But I think that it all just kind of comes back to like these are classes where the entire point of the class is that you're trying to teach students how not just what not you're not just trying to teach them material, you're trying to teach them how to read. You're trying to get them to practice these critical skills, but you're not doing, how do I put this? You're trying to force these students to actually read, and in the past that used to work, and AI just kind of complicates things and makes it so that you can't even really force students to read anymore. Like they have to want to read the material, and that comes with a whole slew of problems.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. Would anybody in the room like to add anything? I know you weren't necessarily assigned to these questions, but we do have a little extra time with this one.
Yeah, kind of echoing Aya's point about efficiency. I think that's a big question is, do we really need to be more efficient? Like my answer would be no. If we're thinking, what are the top 5 problems at AU or top 5 rooms for improvement in academia or whatever the question you want to ask is, I don't think efficiency makes the list in any case. I think we're plenty efficient, and the problem is our expectations for ourselves as humans, not as machine learning. And I think another issue that it brings up within the classroom is an equity issue of time use. If all of my classmates are using AI to get an assignment done, they're going to do it a lot faster. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be done better, but it's going to be a lot faster for them. And then ideally, our instructors are responding to students' mentalities around how long things are taking, adding or taking things off the syllabus for the next semester. If all of that is based on students using machine learning and AI to complete their assignments, it becomes less and less grounded in real student experiences. And I also think it makes extra labor for instructors, because the thing that we skipped over so far, I think, is just that a lot of these AI models are just not accurate in many cases. The things they're spitting out sound right, but aren't always actually right, especially when you're asking it to synthesize things that are behind paywalls. Sometimes it's just going to guess what that article or that paper is writing about. And it's going to put it into language that sounds right, but isn't. And so I think it makes a lot more, I've had instructors say that they have to go back and check papers a lot more thoroughly for different things than they were checking for before. Because if a student is writing their own summary of a paper, it's not always going to be the way the professor wants it or would like to see it, but it's usually going to be accurate, I would hope, versus what AI is spitting out just may be entirely wrong. And then there's a lot more back end work for instructors on that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch over to Naz's video. Oh, yeah. Here.
What you're all saying is just so important. I wanted a clarification on about classmates using it and how faculty respond to that in terms of revising assignments. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So like we talk a lot about how instruction should be based on student response, and that should be a factor when you're improving a class for the following semester or even in mid-semester to get things back on track. And so ideally, if students are reporting back to you that they're getting assignments done really quickly, or you can just tell from the Canvas or whatever that they're getting it done really fast, and just having this like super efficient completion of assignments and readings and things like that, the response then we would hope would be to give more readings, to give more assignments, to make them lengthier, to be challenging students at the adequate basis for the institution. And so if we're basing those things off of what AI can do and not off of what students can do and how fast, that's a concern to me, because the students who aren't using AI are then becoming more and more overburdened as time goes on, and more pressure to start using AI to get their assignments done.
I want to add to that. I feel like also when instructors approach AI first without like talking about the punitive aspects of it, and just more so about like if you write your paper with AI, it's gonna sound very boring, and it's not gonna sound like you wrote. It's not gonna be organic, you know. And I feel like when instructors like mention these things and how they kind of just want to hear like the student's voice in the paper, and because you can put a paper that's written by human and a paper that's written by AI and really like recognize the difference, because there's just this specific language and words that it uses that you can instantly recognize. Whereas a paper written by a student that didn't use AI, you can really see like the narrative and the like rhetoric that they use, and it's just like much more stronger. And so I feel like my own experience, I've taken environmental justice with Malini Ranganathan, and she basically like what she did was give us like a list of um not to-dos with AI, but she did recognize that like it is a useful tool, and she gave us the opportunity to, in our like 13-page paper, to use AI in like a paragraph or like a couple like a portion of our paper, but to cite it correctly. So you can tell students like, if you're going to use AI, that's fine. Just know how to cite it correctly and let me know. That's like the issue, is a lot of instructors like either omit that, or they just like don't talk about the elephant in the room that is AI. And I feel like having like recognizing both is like pros and cons, and just like being realistic that like it's a tool, it's gonna like develop. So people are gonna use it. I'm gonna have to work with it. So that's just like one thing to be cognizant of.
Thank you, Ayah. And I'm going to now play Naz's intro and answer to this question. Yes, I think we might have to run the mic back to Derek.
I agree. This is such an important conversation. I'm really happy to hear these responses. Just in terms of some of the last couple of thoughts. And I have a joint appointment between KOGAD and SIS, so I get different sides to this debate, obviously. But in KOGAD, just a couple of things I wanted to add. So starting last year, we had an AI disclosure form that's required for all assignments. And the AI disclosure form runs from, I used AI to help, or generative AI in particular, I'm going to talk about that in a second, but I use generative AI tools to help do X, Y, and Z. Or I did nothing. I didn't use it at all. And so for every assignment, there's an expectation that you'll sort of think through how you're using it and then document that. And then we also have a number of ways, as the last speaker was saying, what's appropriate for documenting uses of AI and how to cite it. And I think our colleague on the panel here mentioned Perplexity. So one of the things that Perplexity does is really focuses on citations and academic sources. So you can look at where it's sourcing those citations from, and you can follow up and look at the primary sources if you want to do that. So I just wanted to add that that's a way of sort of thinking through how do you manage this process. And I would also say that in KOGAD, we have a center called ProComms, Center for Professionalism and Communication. And one of the things that ProComm does is students can go and see ProComms and say, what are some appropriate ways for me to use AI on this particular assignment, generative AI? And ProComms will walk the students through a process of, sort of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So it's quite helpful to have those kinds of resources available, because I know students are feeling all kinds of ways and getting all kinds of information about these tools.
I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. Katelyn.
Yes.
Are you gonna also answer this question? Because you said
I
that
would
you're
love to,
using
but
it
I
a
don't
lot.
want to cut off. We have another student that's on that video, so
Okay.
maybe.
I want to
but we
hear
can
from you
talk
because you
after.
said you used it so much in the
I
class.
try not to, but I'm supposed to. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, happy to talk to anybody after if you need like a
Let's hope that this works. We do not hear anything.
While they pull that up, I would love, sorry, I would love to respond. And I'm not saying this in any negative way. I just would like to say I'm familiar with that AI disclosure form. And as a senior that took 18 credits, I had one class that used it and it was not enforced. I do agree that Perplexity is better at giving you sources. Would I say that they're the same sources that are the top 5 on Google? Yes, in my opinion.
I can also add on while we're waiting. Related to Perplexity, not specifically Perplexity, but just kind of like a Gen Z perspective, because I don't know how many folks are like heavily on TikTok and social media and things. I've been seeing a lot of ads about AI models that are supposed to be alternatives to ChatGPT, and it's sponsored ads with influencers or academics or whatever the case may be, specifically saying, look at this research analysis tool, and they're targeting master's and PhD students. That's who they're saying, this is so great. I'm a PhD student. I use this. It helps me get through my reading so fast, which, yeah, that's good that you're getting your stuff done faster, but that's also really scary to me because ideally if you're pursuing a higher degree, it's because you want to create something human and new. So yeah, I'm very alarmed by that as well. I think it's better than ChatGPT, which is going to be maybe inaccurate a lot of the time for that kind of work, but it's still really alarming to me at least.
We'll continue with the questions before AV gets here. Because I think the video sound is going to Zoom, but not in the room. So that'll be a problem.
And it's hard that the AI detectors are so incredibly inaccurate and don't catch most, and we all the time send each other a screenshot of something and say, oh, this is so AI. Look at my professor, look at my classmate that used AI on this, but it seems like the checkers themselves, at least from what I'm told, they're not great. Yeah, I was happy about that move, especially to do it so early in this coming AI time. It was interesting. Out of six. Okay, I'm gonna talk into the mic unless my coworkers tell me not to. Okay. My bosses. So I was given it in some classes. There were some classes where it wasn't mentioned, right? Like there's some classes where you're not given this AI form. I personally don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know from the faculty perspective if faculty are told, please introduce this in the first week. I'm not sure. I don't know if that breaks a different rule. From the student perspective, my classes that AI would have been the most to my downfall, it was often not even introduced as an option. And then all of those classes I noticed at the end of the semester, SET time, they all say, hey, I bet you noticed that we didn't talk about AI. And that's because I knew you were going to use it and I didn't want you to, but it's not my job to police you all the time. And if your work is good, sometimes that's all I can ask. And that was an interesting perspective. And I did not use AI in any of my classes, but obviously, especially in those classes. But I can't speak to my fellow students if they were more or less inclined, if there was less responsibility to fill out the form. I'm not sure.
Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties. It's been a journey this morning. So we're going to go on to the next question. I think a lot of these topics all these questions overlap, right, and what your answers are to them. So we wanted to ask, what are some of the big picture AI related topics that you think we need to engage with? Or what do you think needs to be a part of the conversation around AI and isn't yet? So I think we have answering this one. So we'll start with Ayah. I'm just going to talk a little bit about AI and environmental concerns.
Sorry, I was muted. One of the big picture topics I think we can talk more urgently on is AI's environmental footprint, not just in terms of carbon emissions, which is like where most of the current research is focused on. There's also like a growing body of work that like looks at the energy intensity of training AI models. And obviously with the current administration, there's also been a shift on addressing that with coal plants. And so I feel like there's a lot of like things that are like rapidly evolving. So it's really hard to like pinpoint one framework or one understanding of AI in the environment. But I feel like from looking at like what is being talked about, what's really missing is a conversation about AI's water footprint. And I feel like with training these systems, it requires massive amounts of water for cooling the data centers. And from my own research, a lot of the companies don't disclose where the water is being sourced from. And not only that does that obviously impact like the environment, the ecosystems, but also like there's an environmental justice aspect of it where it also impacts like surrounding communities. I think it's also like critical to ask like where are these like data centers are being built and at whose expense are they being built? Like are we placing these like water data centers and infrastructures in like areas that like need to save money on energy without considering the long-term social and like ecological costs. So I feel like it's not just like an environmental issue, it has to be also like an environmental justice issue. Because if you're gonna integrate like AI into every part of institutions and like lives and like universities, you need to be more transparent on about the trade-offs and not just the benefits like of AI, of building these data centers to expand AI.
Thank you, Ayah.
Yeah. If you don't mind me adding on real quick,
Oh, yeah.
actually.
Zoe, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to slip in there real quick because you were already talking about water consumption. And it's also important to note because you mentioned like where they're being built. A lot of these centers are being built around agricultural areas. They're being built in areas that are already under water stress. So it's not just when you build a data center out in the middle of nowhere, it's not really out in the middle of nowhere. It is actively taking that water from somewhere else. A lot of that's being taken from from agriculture. A lot of it's being taken out of farmland. A lot of it's being taken out of areas that are already seeing high levels of water consumption. And so it's just another added stressor on top of everything that's already happening.
I'll pass it now to Gabriela, who might want to build off that. And then I think you were also going to talk about AI and employment.
So just brief comment about the environmental stuff, because I'm not an environmental expert by any means. But I think a lot of what I've seen in terms of pushback to folks critiquing AI from an environmental perspective is that we're already living beyond our means in every other sense. And so this is just one more thing. What are we going to do about it? To me, the big difference is that we know how to live without AI. We were just doing that for many, many years. Very, very recently, we know how to live well and work efficiently without AI. And so to me, it's not an inevitable thing. And then moving on from the environment, I mentioned earlier I'm a gender studies major. I took a class earlier this semester that was about gender in the modern US economy. And it was a weekend 1 credit class. And it was an entire group that did their project about AI and gender. And one of the major takeaways was that the jobs that AI is quote unquote taking or reducing or making less available are not equally distributed. It is primarily HR jobs or service work jobs or DEI roles, which are predominantly occupied by women and other marginalized folks at a disproportionate rate. And so the employment impacts are not evenly distributed either. The people who are being able to keep their jobs and make even more money due to AI are primarily located in those privileged populations already. So it's kind of entrenching those things. And then also from an educational perspective, relating to bias, we know that AI's job is to replicate and reinvent the existing data that it is fed by. And so if that existing data is biased, which much of our data is, it's going to replicate and worsen that in its outcomes. And specifically within the classroom, it's increasing the same lines of bias and entrenching those divides that we already see in K-12 and in higher ed. AI reflects the perspectives of its creators and of the data that feeds it. And both of those things are flawed right now and will be for a long time. And so it takes a pretty big human hand to keep it on track. And I don't think we're there right now, which is why that's why I'm afraid of what's going on right now. But yeah, that's most of mine.
Thank you, Katelyn. Thank you, Gabriela. And then now Katelyn, a little bit of AI and politics or geopolitics.
Oh, me?
Yeah. If you're prepared for that, but it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest big picture thing is also the bias. I think it's just, I don't see any world in which it's worth building more knowledge off of historically historically white supremacist, elitist values. And that's where we're getting our data. And that's because that's what American history is, right? But I don't see any point in furthering, I forget what you said exactly, Gabriela, but furthering that gap or rudimenting that gap into U.S. education, I think is one of the scariest things that we're doing right now. But yeah, that's just me.
Try one more time to play Naz's video now that AV has fixed that for us.
Hello everyone, my name is Nasaiah Algarin. I am an undergraduate student in the School of Communication and the School of Education, class of 2027. My journey with AI has been complicated, both as a tool for learning and as a challenge to what learning really means. At American University, I've seen its influence in classrooms, in my own research, and even in the work I do with other organizations and community projects. Today, I'm excited to share my perspective with you all. When I think about AI and learning, I see two sides. On one hand, AI has been incredibly helpful for efficiency. I've used it to quickly summarize dense research articles, map out complex concepts, and even as a brainstorming partner when I'm stuck on ideas. In many ways, it's like having a second pair of hands when I'm managing a heavy course load and leadership responsibilities. It helps me get more done in less time, and when you're balancing schoolwork and community involvement, that does matter. But that convenience comes with trade-offs. I've caught myself leaning too much on AI-generated summaries instead of deeply engaging with the text. It's almost like I'm outsourcing my own learning process sometimes. It's quick, it's easy, but it's also surface level. And that's where I start to see the actual impact AI can have, not just on learning, but how I feel on my own abilities. One of the biggest issues I've experienced is psychological dependency. When you start relying on AI to fill in gaps, it's easy to lose confidence in your own skills, and I've seen it in my own work. Times where I instinctively reach for ChatGPT or another AI tool instead of pushing through a challenging concept myself. AI can feel like a shortcut, and it's tempting, but it also means I'm skipping the struggle that actually helps me grow as a thinker. There's also the impact on research skills. When I'm using AI for quick answers, I'm not fully engaging in the research process. I'm skipping the part where I would normally dig through different perspectives and form my own understanding. That's a real concern, especially for students who are still developing those skills. And if we're not careful, we lose that critical thinking muscle.
And I hear some parallels with what Ayah was saying before, what Gabriela and Katelyn have shared, even Zoe was sharing, and I saw Allison nodding a lot. I don't know if Allison, you have anything just quick to add on to what Naz was saying, and then we'll move to our final question.
Yeah, thanks. I think all of our conversations, I feel like, to me, showed that the students in this group are doing the kind of thinking that through some means or another they've recognized as really important. And not every student is at that point, I think. And so I feel like what I really want to make sure our participants get to hear is like what advice our students here have based on your experience in your journey to becoming a critical thinker about AI, and what advice you'd sort of give to faculty who want to sort of inspire your peers to sort of get there as well. And I'll mention one last thing. Naz's video reminded me that in our first conversation, Naz said, academic integrity is about how you show up to learn. And I thought that was a really obvious. Everybody who knows me knows how much I loved that line and want to use it in every single bit of material I create. So I want to credit Naz with that line, but also that notion that I think from our conversations with this group of students is nuanced and deep. And so I don't know if I could use that to sort of introduce the next question, if that's helpful. But I guess what I'd really like our participants to get is like some advice from the students that are here about sort of how did you get to this point in your thinking on AI, and what can you advise for those of us who are working with students who may not be there yet, about how we can kind of inspire that level of thinking and kind of give some guardrails, expectations, certainly, but also get to what I read in your comments as a kind of more nuanced and complicated understanding of the scene. I guess I should pick somebody to start. Let's start with Zoe.
Yeah, sure. So I've mentioned this, I think, yeah, I've mentioned this before, but I'm very specifically grounded in a field that's like in a field of critical theory and kind of within the humanities. So I can't really speak beyond that. But for any professors here who are within these sorts of fields where it's like a lot of the work that you're doing is kind of subjective and it is kind of based on these personal analyses more than anything else. Like American studies is always going to operate differently from like econ or business. That's just kind of a fact, I think. What I've found has been the most useful is for my professors is to just be upfront about the fact that within certain fields, AI just isn't capable of producing good work. That's something I've found within my fields because I don't use AI with regularity, not because I don't know how to use it, but because I have messed around with it and because I have tried to use it, not for the sake of using it, but rather just to see what it is capable of. And I have found that it just does not produce good work. I have spoken with professors on this and I've had professors tell us just straight up at the beginning of the year, like, I'm not going to ban you from using AI, but just know that if you use AI on your assignment, you're probably not going to get better than a C. And for some students, that's good enough. But for many of us, especially at a place like AU where it is encouraged to always kind of be moving beyond the standard, for a lot of students, that isn't good enough. And I think that that's important to know that AI does have, within certain fields, very severe limitations. And I think within critical theory and within humanities, that's where those limitations show up the most, because you're being asked to perform these kind of personal, subjective analyses, and you're being asked to work with unconventional sources and sources that what's the word? that split off from like primary narratives and from mainstream narratives. And that's not something AI is very good at because it goes against just what AI is meant to do, which is to synthesize the most common answer, essentially.
Great. Should we toggle into the room?
I can go ahead, if that's okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, all my professors have had like conflicting viewpoints. Um, I take some classes in environmental science. I'm in SIS. For my environmental science courses, surprisingly, some of them have actually encouraged us to use AI in things that we like aren't familiar with. Like for example, I've taken a course that um, some of the assignments utilize Python coding, and a lot of the students don't have a background in Python. And our instructor actually like told us if we are having trouble with coding that we can use AI to just check our code before like running it. And if we're having, because like, I don't know if you guys know this, but sometimes like there's actually AI that's being integrated into Python. So like if you put like a wrong um, function, sometimes like AI will like tell you, oh, like, oh, do you mean this? Um, I find that helpful because I'm not a big coder, to be honest. And then in my geographic information systems class, if we're having like troubleshooting issues or things that are um, not making our maps like run and be good maps, we've like been told to we can ask like AI to like help us out. Although AI has been an issue with GIS because before AI there was just like online forums where everyone would just like ask and ask questions and people would like respond to them, and it was kind of like a growing community. And AI completely got rid of that because now people just like go to AI and ask these questions rather than form this community where everyone can refer you to someone that might know something specific to your GIS inquiry. And then some instructors, like I said, they've been learning to live with it. And some of them have like said that if you're having trouble like getting started like on a topic, just like picking like a research topic, try using AI to just do like the preliminary like work of like constructing an outline. But after that, not use AI after that like portion. But yeah, it's been a lot of like mixed, varied opinions. And one thing I'll like share like as a personal side note, it has been kind of exhausting like navigating what each like instructor needs are, because there's not one like policy for all. Like you kind of just have to gauge what the professor is expecting of you. Um, so it can be like especially overwhelming for undergraduates that are taking multiple courses. I feel like it's a little bit easier if you're in graduate school because you're not like relying on AI or anything like that, but um, and you're not taking as many courses. But for undergrads, I feel like especially if they're freshmen and they're, let's say, taking like those like important core classes like writing, then there needs to be a conversation about AI policy, because like when you take that writing course your first year of college, like you're expected to grow as a writer and you're expected to like produce like great work, and having like AI play into that is going to be interesting moving forward in your undergraduate tenure.
Can we go to the room? Gabriela and Katelyn want to jump in? Advice for
Who
faculty?
is ready to be
People who work.
shocked by what I say about CoGod? I'm kidding, obviously. Yes, so CoGod, we are required to use AI in a lot of our classes. Like I hinted at earlier, I do not. I will say, like, I used to use AI a lot. Like, I don't want to come on here and say I'm this righteous person, right? Like, we all learn in our own ways, right? I have been a person that's used AI a lot, and I am now a person that refuses to touch it. Oftentimes, just kind of a specific example in Kogod, it's, the assignment is to pitch a new product to a company, and you have to use AI specifically to make your image mock-ups, right? And that, most of us can't do that by hand. Like, I understand. I used to have a graphic design minor that I ended up dropping to graduate early, so I am able to do it. My group mates are not. So typically what I would end up doing is saying to my group of 3 or 4 people, hey, I don't believe in AI. I don't believe in it. I don't believe that there's an ethical consumption of AI, and so I don't choose to use it. If you want to follow the instructions as given and use it to generate this image, you can do that, and I will do something else. I'll contribute in another way. Some days you can't get around that. There has been times where I've had to do it, if it's a solo assignment and you're required to use AI in a certain way. I had an assignment where we had to make a script for a commercial with AI and then perform the script. And then we also had to make the commercial itself with AI and then compare our script performance to AI generated imagery, I guess, and like a robot narrator. So it's very prevalent. I'd say there's ways to get around it, but again, I've had to use it nonetheless. And I guess something I left out, I also graduated with a certificate in disability health and bodies, which is housed in CRGC, where Zoe and Gabriela are more so. I cannot imagine Dr. Aho or anyone else there asking me to use AI. So there are places at the university that are like very much protected and like aren't touching AI. But if you're a student like me that's in business, it's, I do more of a tell than an ask, but yes, all of my professors know how I feel about AI. I've talked about it. Oftentimes I share because CTRL does some really good critical work on AI, and obviously it's not all just abstinence from AI. But still, I like to point them towards, hey, like this is what the faculty at this university that are paid to research teaching and learning at this university and beyond, of course. This is what they're saying, and these are the critiques they have. So that was always kind of a backup for me to say, hey, I don't believe in this, and here's something that's approachable for you to see why, if that makes sense.
Sorry. Yeah, so we obviously have very particular opinions about this, and I say that because it doesn't mean you have to, or your students have to, whatever, resonate with our feelings about this, but I think the takeaway for me is that your students may have more critical and more diverse views on AI than you initially think, because they probably aren't reporting those views or those questions that they have back to an authority figure, who they may view as like an AI police. Doesn't mean that's who you are, but they may view it that way. And so I would say keep in mind, like, your students may not feel the way you think they do about AI, have these critical conversations with them, see where they're at. And if they are very pro AI and they do use AI a lot, you may not, I would say also remove your assumptions about why that is. Because for many of them, it's an efficiency thing. I don't think that's a good thing, but I think that's better than just uncritically accepting it into your life, at least from my personal ethics on it. Students are overburdened. This is not news. They have been for years. It's more and more so every year. And they're looking for efficiency. And if this provides efficiency, that may be a comforting thing to them. And so instead of thinking about how can I be punitive about reducing AI or improving AI or whatever the case may be, whatever your goal is in your classroom, I think it's more important to think about why they're using it and how you can help them be more critical about their use of it, even if you are a classroom where you encourage its use. The other thing is, and we've talked about this in the past, course policy about AI needs to be specific. If students don't know what you want from them, they struggle, and that's just like a general rule, but it applies to AI as well. Specific and relevant to your field as well. What kind of when we say AI, do you mean generative AI? What do you mean ChatGPT specifically? Do you mean the paid models? What are you referring to that you're banning, allowing, requiring, whatever the case is? And what kind of use? We hear a lot of students say, I don't really believe in AI. I just use it to make my outline. I just use it to draft. I just use it to collect my research. And everyone is drawing these kind of falsified boundaries around what is ethical and at what point does it not become your work anymore? We aren't agreeing on that. And so being specific about those things and having an open conversation with your students, I think is even better about why you're implementing those different lines that you are. And the last assumption that I had noted is I've heard this, I would say most of my classes, I hear this from the professor the first week. I always know when it's an AI paper, you're not going to get it past me. That's not correct, in my opinion. There are flagrant, obvious uses of AI that, yes, you're going to pick up on. Any human would look at that and go, that's not written by a student, that's not written by a human. But there are many cases where it's weaved in more intricate and more thoughtful ways. I don't think that's necessarily, doesn't mean it is better than just a fully AI paper, but it doesn't mean it's good, in my opinion. But don't be so confident that you will catch every instance of AI. And encourage that kind of transparent conversation with your students so that you don't feel like you're having to police and surveil their work in that way.
And I'd love to add one very small thing to what Gabriela said. Something we've talked about a lot that I've seen in my classes is the AI usage. The more usage is coming from often students who are at disadvantages in other ways. Students whose first language is not English, students who are first generation, students who are from marginalized groups, etc. Working students, heavily working students. And I don't, just because we get to sit up here and say we don't really agree with AI and we choose not to use it and all these things, we don't want to come off as high and mighty, because every group project I'm in, there's a student who really, they don't have the time on their hands, they don't have the same resources that I do. There's plenty of reasons where I think that we need to have a lot of grace, and students should not be told, oh my goodness, why would you ever do this? This is terrible and unethical and da-da-da. A lot of people don't know, a lot of people don't have as much of an option.
Another thing I would like to add from the from the viewpoint of specifically instructors and professors who are looking to use AI, is that I think it's very important to remember that your decision on whether you use AI as an instructor, as a professor, should be made with the knowledge that students, generally speaking, do not have recourse in whether or not they know whether you use it unless you tell them straight up. They might, unless you put it on the syllabus, they won't go into your class knowing if you use it. And if we have a problem with the way that you're using it, whatever that way might be, we don't really have a lot of options for recourse. Like this isn't something that happened at AU. This happened at another institution. But I have a friend of mine whose paper was recently very flagrantly graded by AI. Like when we talk about like, oh, we just know, like it was one of those cases of you look at it and you know that it is ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT. And my friend had literally no option for recourse. Like they went to the department head, and the department said, well, the instructor said it wasn't AI and we're allowed to use it anyways, so what can we do? And I think that's important to remember, that instructors are able to monitor students and are able to regulate students because of that role, but students do not generally have any real recourse against instructors. So I just think you have to be aware of the power dynamic that's kind of inherently at play when you decide to use AI, and how you decide to use it and how you decide to have your students use it, if at all.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm going to play Naz's kind of 1 minute closeout, and then we'll have about 5-ish minutes for questions. We're going to run a little bit over since we got started late. And please put those in the chat as well, because I can see the chat up here.
What I've also noticed is a lot of inconsistency across different departments and professors. Some are fully embracing AI as a tool for learning, while others have strict no AI policies. Personally, I think there's space for balance. It's about learning with AI, not just learning through it. It's about using it as a resource, not as a replacement for our own thinking. I think the key takeaway is that AI is here and it's changing how we learn, whether we want it or not. But it's up to us to decide if it's going to make us stronger thinkers or just more efficient task doers. I hope this conversation today sparks that reflection.
Yeah, I think that specific line there, that are we going to be stronger thinkers or just more efficient task doers, really resonated with me. So very quickly, I saw Patricia in the chat said they have a question, and then we can take a few more questions.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a really interesting workshop. I really appreciate everybody's time.
What I've also noticed is a lot of
I wanted to kind of follow up on some of the discussion Gabriela brought up, particularly because she mentioned that in COGOT, it's required. So I just kind of, I'm a professor in the Spanish language program, so I'm really would like to kind of see if she can elaborate a little bit more as to when she says required, like how is it articulated in the syllabus? And also, I think it would be interesting. I would like to know, like, what is the perspective of the students with this policy? How is it received across the board? If you can share that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for your question. I appreciate it. Typically, it's required in a specific way. It's make your outline using AI, proofread your paper with AI. I find that typically there is a, one sentence task, of how to or not how, but why or where to use AI. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the second part of your question.
Oh, how is it received with the students across the board in the COGOT
yes. Okay,
department?
Awesome. So I am 100% in the minority in terms of people that are critical of AI in COGOT. And I'm going to give the caveat that my big example is a friend of mine that interned at JP Chase and is about to work there full time in New York City this summer. Last summer, I spent 2 months working on a presentation that she was assigned to do. Did, of course, all the research in the world, beautiful slide deck, presented it to executives, and they said, "Why did this take you 2 months? You should have used our in-house AI." And she was punished for that. Like, they told her, if you do this again, you're not at JP Chase anymore, right? So I understand the COGOT perspective from that. Right? I think that Dave knows what's happening in the corporate world very well, and he knows that that's the demand that's happening. And I think students, obviously, once you have that first bank internship where you are exposed to that narrative, I understand it's easy to be indoctrinated. And I also recognize that, not that I'm about to go work for a bank, but if I were to, I recognize that I would not be able to hold the values that I hold, and I would have to fold a lot of them.
Thank you so much, Gabriela.
Thank you.
There's another question in the chat kind of building off of that, and maybe another student wants to share. Expectations for the workplace, and do you feel classes can or should help prepare them to use AI in the workplace, or do you feel like you can pick that up later when and if it's needed?
Katelyn again. I am of the opinion that we do not need to train people how to use AI. It is meant so that you can ask it questions that are easier to write than Google. So I truly don't see any world in which we need to train our students to use AI. I understand giving the expectation that, hey, when you go into corporate America, they're going to make you use AI, or, obviously I can't speak to other fields, but I'm sure that there's places in education even, that they say you have to use AI. But I think that there's a line between acknowledging that it's going to happen in the, real world, and making students prepare for it. And kind of a silly analogy, it reminds me of how we put children through standardized testing starting when they're, 5, and you just say, oh, it's prep for the next big test, and then it's prep for the SATs, and it's just, we're prepping them over and over and over for something that happens junior year of high school. And not to go on the education rant, but it's frustrating to me that we have to prepare our students for something for so long that a lot of them aren't going to agree with.
Yeah, we have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this falls into teaching students how to use AI. I don't think I use AI very well, actually. I don't use it at all. But I think that it is a kind of our task to teach our student how to check AI and how to be skeptical of AI.
Mhm.
And so I see that that could be a part of a class. I don't think I wouldn't ask my student to use AI to do an assignment, but I could see myself introducing assignment like debate with AI, like use ChatGPT as as the second person in your debate and to kind of counter what they say. And so I think that that could belong to a classroom.
Yeah. And you bring up another really important thing. We talk a lot about in CTRL how some things that we do just burden instructors overtly, right? And I'm assuming that most of the instructors at AU, unless you maybe got your doctorate last year, were not trained on how to, check AI and teach AI and train it and all these things. And I do think that it's something to be said that we're now expecting faculty, just any professor to now be an expert and to police their students in ways that they had never known.
Hi. Do you think that on the first day of class, students would appreciate a discussion on AI and kind of establishing course expectations to give them a sense of agency? Or would it just be like, oh, grown, another conversation about AI?
I mean, I think it is the latter, but I think you have to have it anyway, at least on the first day, because the alternative is students not knowing what you want from them, which is never a good thing. But yeah, I think it needs to be clear policy, relevant to your field, and specific about where you do and don't want to see it. I don't know that you're going to get a positive response from students for having that conversation, but not everything instructors do gets a positive response. That's nothing new.
I'm wondering how much policies make a difference in terms of students' use. What I hear is students either don't want to use it because they want the learning, or they feel they need to use it. And so, what difference is a policy going to make in terms of AI use?
I think that's a very great point of students are kind of going to do what they want. I think that could be very true for many students. I think at least for this, if you're saying, okay, let's say your policy is, I don't want to see AI in this classroom, which plenty of mine, that is the policy. I don't want to see it in your papers. I don't want to see it in your assignments. I think it will at least get students sneakier, which may not be a good thing, but it won't be a fully AI paper that's turned in more of the time. They may at least try to clean it up to look like a human, which is still more academic work than they would be doing otherwise. So I guess that's an improvement. But more so, I think on the back end, you mentioned earlier they had removed the Turnitin AI checker, and because it was not accurate, it was flagging things that were not AI as AI produced, and it was getting students into trouble that didn't deserve to be into trouble. I think if you don't have a policy up front, you're going to run into issues on the back end with that. So I think it's honestly more of a liability thing in terms of academic integrity and students knowing what you want from them. At least they are aware that they are breaking a rule if they are breaking a rule, even if they choose to do so anyway. There needs to be a clear communication about what's going to happen after that.
We have 2 questions for the online folks. Karen, if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. I have a bad cold, so excuse my Kim Carnes, Betty Davis eyes voice. Yeah, as Katie and others have talked about, we're thinking a lot about AI at Kogod. We do have an imperative and a challenge from our dean to prepare students for an AI-informed workforce. And there is a lot of nuance going on at Kogod. We're surveying faculty, we're surveying students. Our student survey should be coming out in the next week, and I'm happy to share the results of that. I think Katie is typical of a lot of our, especially juniors and seniors, who had AI sort of appear at the end of their BA, BS journey. And are proud of their critical thinking skills, their research skills. They want to own their learning. I think some of our newer students are figuring out and can almost feel overwhelmed by us throwing AI at them. So we as faculty and staff have a lot of work to do. And I couldn't agree more with, I think it was Katie just now saying, have the conversation with your students. AI is a tool. You can't just say thumbs up, thumbs down. I follow the advice from Christina at DomGen, who's got her green light, yellow light, red light, like different aspects of different assignments. There's so much nuance here. And so students want to do the right thing, I think mostly. They want to follow the rules and they want some of this mediated for them. Students, you can agree, if you'd like. In terms of, I'm thinking one example, we have a faculty member who teaches a negotiations class to juniors and seniors. She does not allow AI the first 6 to 8 weeks of the course. While students are learning foundational concepts, they're doing their own interviews of people who've had successful and unsuccessful negotiations. But then in terms of requiring AI, later in the course, she asks the students to prompt the AI to be a sparring partner, a negotiations partner, with a detailed prompt. Have this as your bottom line, have this as your terms, and it becomes an assistant to practice with. So I think this idea of we've got a lot of work to do to use the AI as imaginatively and appropriately as we can if we're requiring it. And that's ideally what it comes down to. The AI disclosure form is about having this real discussion about why this tool, for what purpose. And so I will stop there. But just to say, I appreciate you having this robust discussion. I think we have to listen to students' investment in their own education and what students want to and need to learn during their college journeys. So I appreciate everybody and happy to be a resource for anything we're trying to do. Oh, one last thing. COGOD faculty have reported an uptick in more oral assignments and assessments, more privileging of classroom discussions rather than a discussion board, which might be easily hijacked by AI. They'll do cold calling and say, we're doing an oral discussion board. I want to see what you know. And so we see that as a trend at COGOD as well. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Karen. We're way past time, so I do want to be respectful of Derek, who will be up next. I do see Rebecca's questions in the chat, and I will share those with the students, and we'll have more conversations like this in the future. But I do want to leave this quick just reflection question for you all to take away from this and think about what new ideas are you leaving with and one thing you might change, and just encourage you to stay connected with the student partners and the work that they're producing, because as you've seen today, their perspectives are extremely valuable to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
For those of you who are online, we're going to switch. We're going to close out this Zoom session, and you can join if you're planning to join the next one via links either on the website or in the confirmation reminder email you received. We will see you soon. Thank you.